Greetings and welcome back to my channel. I'm going to talk about a few brand new releases that I just received. I'm very excited about. The one I'm playing at the moment, Lee Konitz plays with the Gerry Mulligan Quartet on World Pacific. A new tone poet, no, a new classics reissue. Or is it a tone poet? It's a tone poet. Not all tone poets are gatefolds, I have come to realize. Probably because I don't have the same beautiful artwork. I'm not trying to match Music Matters. But there's that, of course. And the beautiful tone poet of The All-Seeing Eye, classic vinyl series of Eric Dolphy, Out to Lunch, and classic vinyl series of Herbie Hancock's Maiden, Voyage. All of these records sound perfect as far as from a sonic standpoint. None have the non-fill problems that I had on the classic vinyl series of Kenny Burrell, Midnight Blue, and the Grant Green Idle Moments. Those were very disconcerting when you got those sudden leaps of distortion is what it sounded like, even though after those fantastic interviews with Joe Harley, not because I was great, but because he's so great, I learned a lot. He explained that non-fill is when the master or the mother, I think it's the master, pressing down on the vinyl biscuit doesn't go all the way down. It has the information on it in reverse from the vinyl grooves. They're going in, they're out like that. It's like female and male, I guess, and it's not going all the way in, so you don't get a complete signal, and that's what it sounds like, a missing signal. But all of these sound beautiful, sonically pristine, but they do all sound quite different. We'll start with this recording, the one I'm listening to now, the Gerry Mulligan Lee Konitz record. I believe Tim Burgess, my good friend on the Jazz Vinyl Lovers page, asked if this one has the mono pump that I talk about sometimes that Blue Notes can have, and it doesn't. This is kind of a soft recording. It's slightly recessed, but I think that's World Pacific. I don't know who did World Pacific. It's probably on here. The original engineer. I'm sure somebody out there already knows, but it doesn't really sound like a Blue Note. Maybe I haven't really researched World Pacific, but perhaps they're more like contemporary, where they're kind of flat and even sounding. But this is sort of soft sounding. The performance is great. It's classic, cool jazz. For my ears, I definitely hear some bop going on as well, and all the kind of winding lines, and they're very catchy. The drumming on this West Coast stuff is always lighter than the drumming on the East Coast material at the same time. And I hate to frame everything in drummers, but at this time, you really did have there really was a divide between West Coast and East Coast. As hard charging as like Shelly Manne and his men were, it still doesn't sound like, a Blue Note session with Philly Joe and Paul Chambers. It's, it's a matter of living. California, I was out there a couple of years ago, and I visited before, just a beautiful place to live, beautiful weather. Well, now we have a lot of fires, it's not that great, but compared to New York, which is, gritty and dense, the weather really stinks here, and that comes out in the music, the grittiness. So for me, all these West Coast records are just kind of like driving with the top down in California, but they're beautiful recordings, and this is really great. I had only had an original pressing of this that was unlistenable, but this is classic, cool jazz, and I hate that phrase because this is really more than that. But we have Lee Konitz on alto, Gerry Mulligan on baritone sax, Chet Baker on trumpet, Larry Bunker on drums, Carson Smith or Joe Mondragon on bass. So this is really, the survival of the definitely the fittest. These guys are the top of their game. What year is this? 53. And this is a beautiful recording. I mean, this is yet another beautiful tone poet. There's nothing bad to say about this. Sounds beautiful, wonderful pressing. It's very informative, but it's interesting. The solo approach of Baker and Konitz and Gerry Mulligan is very different from the soloing approach of Jimmy Heath from the West Coast, or Pepper Adams on baritone, or obviously any number of trumpet players from Lee Morgan to Donald Byrd. The trumpet players, perhaps even more so, are just pushing really hard, and the tunes written for Blue Note, they're much more physical in a way. But this is a really nice change up from that. This is more late night music. It's a little bit cooler. It's a little bit sweeter and softer, but really a classic recording. Maiden Voyage, Herbie Hancock. When I became aware of jazz and I became aware of Herbie Hancock, this was the record that everybody talked about. It has, a young Herbie Hancock, a young Tony Williams, Freddie Hubbard, George Coleman, Ron Carter. Maiden Voyage is a standard on its own that everybody played. When I was coming up playing drums, and you have the real book, it was an unusual phrase. And the rest of it is slightly avant-garde, more avant-garde than I remember, actually. There's a lot of exploration going on here. It's very exploratory, mirroring what was going on in Miles' group at the time, which is, I think, the early 60s. And this is a pivotal, essential recording to have. I mean, if you're going to have a top 10, Blue Note records to start a collection, this is one of them. I like Empyrean Isles a lot. I like it a little better, actually, than this. Taken Off is pretty good. Inventions and Dimensions is essential. That's probably my favorite Herbie Hancock record from this period, just because it's so fiery. That's an avant-garde record, but it's an avant-garde Afro-Cuban record, because it's Herbie with Ray Barretto and somebody playing Shekere, and it's abstract. It's very abstract. And Herbie's playing all these very jabbing figures. They're almost like something you hear in modern ballet, the stuff he's playing. And he's not playing your usual chord sequences. That's a great record, Inventions and Dimensions. But if you don't have any Herbie Hancock records, this is one to start with. And as I said, the pressing is beautiful. The jackets are nicely done. They're very solid. One to own and one to cherish, friends. Funny, just as this was the record that everybody would get, initially from Herbie Hancock, this was the record of Eric Dolphy you would get. This is the Eric Dolphy record to have if you're only having one. I'm not a huge Dolphy fan, but this is such a classic recording. To a lot of people, this, probably more so than the Ornette Coleman records, represents free jazz and was their way into free jazz. To me, it sounds like Monk and Mingus, and it's like on a roller coaster. This recording, I don't have one to compare it to. Super dynamic, great left and right spread. The signal is very hot. In the interview with Joe Harley, he talked about how Rudy, he would push the mid-range a little bit and put that low-end bump to give it the impression of bass, even though there wasn't bass. But this sort of retains the hotness. I get the feeling they put up some of the tapes, and there's so much Rudy in there, they don't change it much, which is what he said. Sometimes they don't change much at all. Both this and the Herbie Hancock record are hot. I mean, the signal is hot. It's in your face. It's not laid back. To me, that's true of all the tone poets. They're a little hotter than when I compare them to a pressing I might have, and I have one here that I compared that I can tell you about. This has very good depth, very good tone. The drums have a lot of space and clarity and snap. I mean, this and the Maiden Voyage really sound fantastic on my system, which at the moment I've got the Thorins, the Jelko, the Concept MC, and I'm playing through the Klipsch Fortes. A little bit of the footage will show that. Once again, probably at least top 15 Blue Note recordings to have. It's so a lot of free jazz from this period that began free jazz has a lot of anger and pain. There's a great sense of the blues in it. If you're thinking of Albert Ayler, or even the Ornette Coleman stuff is much darker and much bluesier. This is much more fun and kind of silly and crazy and off kilter. Mad hijinks. There's a real sense of humor in this that you don't hear in a lot of other free jazz, which is part of why this is such an essential recording. Wayne Shorter, the All Sing. I was actually kind of surprised they put this out, because this is a really unusual record from Wayne. It's Wayne's orchestral record on Blue Note, and you wonder why he didn't get it earlier in his career, because man, to hear his melodies and arrangements, you know, framed on a larger orchestral palette is really something. I think it's Joe Chambers on drums. It is Joe Chambers on drums, and the drums have so much space on this recording. It's really something. It's weird. This was much hotter than my UA pressing that has a Van Gelder stamp. It was hotter. My UA pressing is a little more laid back. Also, another thing about both of those classic reissues, they don't have a lot of bass, you know, which is another sign that Kevin and Joe didn't do too much, because he said on some of those old things there wasn't much bass. So Rudy gave it a bass bump. Well, now they're just letting the bass be, at least those two recordings, and it's kind of light. It's there, but it's just kind of light. It's full, but it's not real insistent or well defined. So the mid-range to the treble has more punch and activity, more like an original pressing, which is kind of surprising. But this is an amazing lineup. Wayne, Freddie Hubbard, Alan Shorter, Gresham Mancourt, James Spaulding on alto sax, Wayne, Herbie Hancock, Ron Carter, Joe Chambers. And this is such an exploratory album. And without reading the liner notes, I think they get into this whole thing that's about birth and creation and chaos. And you can definitely hear that. There's such a wide palette of sounds on this recording, and there is more air on this than on my original pressing. I think, well, it's not original, but it's a Van Gelder stamp. I think I do prefer this to my UA Van Gelder stamp pressing of this. This is really just hotter, better definition. There's definitely more spatial qualities happening in the drums, which are where I'm sitting when I'm playing my system. So yeah, I don't think you can go wrong with any of these. They all sound great. There's no sonic problems, beautiful pressings. And particularly, I mean, this is not the Wayne Shorter record to start with. I think if you're going to start with the Wayne Shorter, you start with Adam's Apple or Juju or my favorite. Well, Night Dreamer's kind of dark, but I'd go with Adam's Apple or Juju probably. Those are sort of accessible and kind of funky recordings. Wayne's made so many left of center recordings. You know, Night Dreamer's my favorite, but Moto Grosso Fio. Schizophrenia is amazing. They haven't reissued that yet. But anyway, this is great. But the ones to get out of these are probably, if you're only getting two, I would get both of these two that just came out last week. These are phenomenal, landmark, epic recordings if you're just starting with those two fellas. And then later in the night, you can play this. I wanted to mention something else. I was royally burned on eBay lately. You know, you really, really, really have to watch out. You know, I sell records for a friend of mine, a lot of Blue Notes, and we sold a Blue Note and got a good bit of money for it. And I put on the ad that there were one of the tracks had about 10 skips. Well, this person claimed he could fix the skips. But then no sooner he got the record, he wanted to return it, and he showed photographs of gouges in the record. Kind of, you know, when a scratch is new, when it's that much of a scratch, it's white. And that scratch was not on the record I sold him. But eBay, who always sides with the buyers, refunded his money. They don't even look at the photographs. They don't really care. So you have to really be careful, and I should probably be more careful in general on the way I list things, but you don't know if you're going to meet somebody like that. I mean, it's very easy to work the eBay system. So my word is, look at somebody's history and ask a lot of questions. Ask a lot of questions if you're buying on eBay. Anyway, thanks again for watching my channel. Bye.